You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Mission Log the Orville, where each week we discuss an episode of the Orville and open that jar of pickles to discuss the meanings, morals, messages, and to see if the episode aligns with the Roddenberry Star Trek philosophy. But not this week, Jess.
No, not this week.
This week we have André Bormanis. My name is Mike Richards.
And I'm Jessica Lynn Verdi. Mission Log is a conversation that depends on your participation, my friends. You can share your thoughts, ideas, tell us what we missed or what we didn't ask André in this specific episode. You can find us at Mission Log Pod on Facebook. We are launching a brand new Mission Log the Orville on Instagram. You can even email us at missionlog-theorville@roddenberry.com. If you're watching us on YouTube, which I highly recommend you should because we're so pretty, you can just give us that like and subscribe, and then you'll know when we drop a new episode. And if you leave a comment, we might use it in an upcoming episode. So I would encourage you to be nice.
Please be nice. And if you can't be nice, at least be constructive.
Yeah,
because
I'm for constructive.
Feedback is neither good nor bad. It's either useful or not useful.
André,
please provide us with some useful feedback.
André, I'm so excited to have you back. I remember after we talked. Yeah, welcome. And we are in the midst of a very, very unusual experience, and we I don't think we can ignore what's going on in LA where you are, and so. I feel very grateful that you are literally donating your time in the midst of what's going on there. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been it's been a heck of a way to start the year, that's for sure. My wife and I went away for the Christmas and New Year's. We got back on late in the evening. Early morning on the 2nd of January. Mm-hmm. And then I went to visit a friend of mine, old friend of mine, also a TV writer, Clay Graham. Clay and I met in second grade, and we have been best friends ever since.
Wow.
He moved out here to Los Angeles right after college, started working as a sort of a copy boy for Norman Lear's company with the aspiration of becoming a writer. He's very funny. He wrote funny articles. He did some cartoons for Mad Magazine and always wanted to be a sitcom writer. And, after a couple of years working in the trenches, he hooked up with a guy who was looking for a writing partner, and they worked on a couple of shows, and he kept working steadily. He was on, I think, Who's the Boss for like 5 years. He was the showrunner on the Drew Carey show. He worked on Santa Clarita Diet, Anger Management. I mean, a bunch of shows. Clay is extremely successful. Nicest guy in the world, and a very good, very funny writer. So, of course, we've been friends for well over 50 years, which is amazing.
That's incredible. That's a very special bond.
Yeah, and, he lived in the Palisades. And week before last, I went over to see him at his house, and we went on a nice walk in this new park that they'd opened up in the Palisades last year. And, it was just another beautiful day in paradise. And literally the following Tuesday, I'm watching the news, and there's a brush fire in the Santa Monica Mountains above the Palisades, about 20 acres. I figured they'll have that out in an hour, and then an hour or 2 hours later, well, it's now 200 acres, and then that night it was 2,000 acres, and it's like, oh my God, what is happening? And then a fire started in Altadena, which is east of Pasadena. And I have friends who live there. And, by later that night, we're still kind of like, gosh, hopefully they'll get this thing out or they'll get it contained. But early the next morning, Clay had to evacuate. And some hours later, his entire neighborhood burned to the ground.
Right.
So his beautiful home in the Palisades, gone. And I have 3 friends in Altadena who lost their homes, and
you really?
7 or 8 in the Palisades who lost their homes. Yeah, so it's a nightmare. And
it is a nightmare. That was the exact word I was thinking.
Yeah. So I live in West LA. I am a little south of Brentwood, a little east of Santa Monica, a little west of Westwood. So it's this funny little bit of West LA that kind of pokes into that area. And the evacuation warning zone for a few days was maybe half a mile north of us. So we had to keep an eye on, what was happening. The red flag warnings got within a few blocks of us for a couple of days.
Wow.
Misha, my wife, and I moved some of our more valuable things out of the house and into a storage unit we have that's in a building about a mile south of here, and
Smart.
concrete and supposed to be very safe. We had the 3 cat carriers ready, plenty of cat food. An old friend of mine offered us her condominium downtown if we needed to evacuate. So we'd packed the cars with our essentials and our meds and some clothing and cat food and litter boxes and everything we would need. And it was like scary because I got to tell you, when I first saw the smoke on Tuesday, man, that was scary. And then Tuesday night, looking toward the northwest, you could see, the glow from the fires, which is very spooky. And I can show you just a couple of shots here.
Normally, when I'm looking at your phone at the party, it's with cats, not for.
Yes. No.
If you can bring it. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. There we go.
Wow.
Yeah, this is from our balcony, looking toward the Palisades. And then
that plume at night.
Yeah. Then at that next night, this is what it looked like. I'm not sure if that was that night or the next night, but there we go.
Oh,
Right.
my
See that glow
God.
behind those office buildings? Or no, those are apartment buildings. And sorry about the glare.
Oh, my God. No, it's fine.
And that's like, and then, yesterday I was sweeping up ash from the, and there's another, you see the smoke is illuminated by the light from the flames.
Wow.
That's looking in the direction of Santa Monica, Malibu.
Those are similar to the pictures
Wow.
my son sent me from UCLA. He got a hold of me Wednesday
really?
night last week and said,
Oh yeah, I'm
hey, since
a mile from UCLA. Yeah.
he said, since classes are canceled, can I come home? And I said, are you safer staying put? And he said, what do you mean? I was like, well, I'm just picturing you driving, to LAX and flaming palm trees coming across the road and cars blowing up and an Uber driver avoiding these things. And he said, I am far safer leaving. So we got him on a plane and he came home. He's taking his class remotely in the office upstairs right now while we're recording this. And that was before most people decided to punch out, so it was pretty non-eventful for him to get out of town.
Right.
But we feel for you and your colleagues and your friends. David Goodman made it public knowledge that he lost his house. He published an op-ed, I guess you'd call it, that was published in the New York
Post.
Daily News. Yeah.
The Daily News.
And I read that. And and
David lives he lives down the street from my friend Clay. They're literally on the same block. And one of my best friends, who I know through Clay, and I didn't find out until several years later when I met Lisa, she and her husband are next door neighbors with David Goodman. And I was over visiting Lisa once after David and I had started working together on Star Trek Enterprise. And I see David walking out of the house next door, and I'm like, Goodman, what are you doing here? He's like, what are you doing here?
I love that.
Lisa's a great neighbor.
Funny.
And they all lost their homes. And
but by the way, real quick, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I can't imagine any of our listeners aren't familiar with your bona fides. But just in case they're not, pause right here.
Yes.
Listen to supplemental Mission Log supplemental number 2 with André Bormanis, and then rejoin us. And we'll continue. And I'll tell you all about who you are.
You during that episode because I was just amazed by your brain that then led you into the writing world. And then, I guess I'm warning people, if they go listen to that episode, you will listen to a fangirl as I was learning about you, not just from the Star Trek lens.
It's amazing. I was thinking about the introduction today, and I was like, all I could think of was Renaissance Man, because not only are you a scientist and engineering background, but you also have a very adroit, philosophical and political science mind, and all of these things blend into your talent as a writer, as a consultant, as somebody who filled out this guide to the Orville with so much backstory that we want to get to eventually once we're
Sure.
once when we're ready to. But just I think fawning is maybe fawning and fanboying are the ways I'd put the way the two of us reacted to chatting with you the first time around.
It's also really easy to talk.
You.
It's easy to talk to you too. I think there's something really nice about that, where we don't have to like ask you to, like, we're not goading you. Not that anyone is like that, but it's nice when it's easy to talk to you about. And in fact, we initially asked you on to talk about your amazing new book over at Dark Horse. And as I was going through it, I thought, I was like, okay, this is going to be a schematics book. I know how dorks are. They love looking at the inner workings of the Jeffrey tubes. I did not realize how comprehensive and in-depth this book must have been for you to just write, because it's so much more than that.
So what was sort of the genesis behind the project? What made you decide to take this on, and what were you trying to do?
Oh, well, it was a very clear genesis. In fact, shortly after we started shooting season 3, it was probably February, March of 2020. We started shooting in late 2019. Trying to remember these dates now. It seems like another lifetime. But David, I was on set, hanging out, looking at some computer graphics and stuff. Seth liked me to check whenever we had a new graphic for a given episode. If it was something, specific to the episode that was kind of sciencey, I would always, check it out before we put it up and stuff. And plus, I love being on set, love hanging with the actors, the directors. And anyway, David Goodman told me that Dark Horse had approached Seth about doing an in-universe book about the Orville. And I said, in-universe, what does that mean exactly? And he said, oh, well, it means treating the ship and its crew as if they're real. So it would be fictional, in effect. And he said that Seth didn't really have any ideas, so he asked me. I don't have any ideas, so I'm asking you. You want to try this? And I said, well, let me think about it. And I thought about it for a few days, and I came up with this idea of a young officer's manual. So the premise of the book is basically, if you've just graduated from Union Point and you're a young ensign, and this is your first deep space assignment is going to be for the crew of the Orville. What do you need to know about the ship, its senior officers, the physical layout, its missions, its history, et cetera, et cetera. So that was sort of my premise in pitching this book. I took that to David. David thought that was great. David took it to Seth. He thought it was great. He pitched it to Dark Horse. They thought it was great. So they said, all right, let's go ahead and have you do this book. So I was like, great. So I started, thinking and outlining, and I knew some of obviously the technical stuff. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the layout of the ship and its systems, and maybe hint a little bit at how the quantum drive works. And
I think that was actually very exciting. So it was exciting for me to get, because we also had the opportunity. We didn't get to talk to David about the Orville comics that were in between each season, because that was right during the strike when we were covering it. And respectfully, we didn't bring anybody creatively on to talk about things because it really wasn't the best. But we did bring him on to talk about the masked Macher. And
the masked Macher.
Right. Yeah. Oh, but I had a point because I just lost it because I was talking. I know.
But you're talking about the quantum drive and how fascinating that was for you.
His in-universe explanation for Space Jaws was that they found a series of old rings, and that ancients must have left behind that allowed them to jump. And so the uneducated dork always wants to know, how did we get to space travel? And so I thought that was really helpful to kind of get a little explanation about that. I thought that was great.
Yeah, well, explanation is a generous way of putting it. It's kind of a lot of hand waving, and I'll tell you the reason that I wanted to think about it and write about it is we do want to distinguish the show from Star Trek. So we
Right.
don't call it warp drive, we call it quantum drive.
Right.
And I've seen some people online criticize that. It's like, and I get it. It's such a hipster word in so many ways, like Deepak Chopra, talks about quantum healing and quantum this and quantum that. And it's all, it's become a little
Gotta
bit
even
meaningless.
think about that. Sure.
But it is meaningful in physics because not only quantum physics is, of course, the foundation of all of our modern technologies, and along with Einstein's general relativity, the cornerstone of modern physics. But if we are ever to create something like a warp drive, something like faster than light travel, it's going to depend on understanding the relationship between quantum mechanics and gravitation. They're still irreconcilable, and physicists have been working on this for nearly a century and still haven't figured it out. And the theory that we're all seeking is called quantum gravity. So quantum gravity, quantum drive. And one of the more interesting ideas about this was developed by a physicist named Roger Penrose, Nobel laureate, brilliant guy, still working. And he has his own interesting idea about quantum mechanics and gravitation. And a friend of mine from college, Joel Sercel, who is a physicist, plasma physicist, engineer, PhD from Caltech. He worked at JPL for many years and has now got his own company. But he helped develop the ion drives on the Vesta spacecraft what was the name of that spacecraft that visited Ceres and Vesta? New Horizons, maybe? No, that was the one that went to Pluto. This is what happens when you get old.
More,
you get confused.
I do remember the mission, though.
That in your mind, yeah.
You're great. You're holding a lot more things than I am, though. So.
Yeah, I do remember that mission that went to visit the comet with the ion drive.
Yeah, the Dawn spacecraft. Okay. Well, Joel was the one who told me about Penrose and how that he had an interesting approach to quantum gravity, and it was an approach that basically allowed movement through a gravitational field without the expenditure of energy and without the sort of increase in mass that happens in special relativity when you travel closer and closer to the speed of light. So I basically used that as my little springboard. And I think in season 1, we wanted to talk about sort of the quote unquote fuel for the quantum drive. And I, like a lot of people who look at this, feel that, negative matter, negative energy kind of plays a role in warping space. And maybe that's something that needs to be part of this kind of system. And I came up with an idea. It's, I'm sure, far-fetched and doesn't really hold water, but, we've got all of these elements on the periodic table naturally occurring that go up to number 92. The rest are essentially made in particle colliders. Right. And these heavy elements, plutonium, Einsteinium, all of these other things, they tend to be highly radioactive and very short-lived. And when you get up to element number like 112, 113, 114, well, they exist for a microsecond, And you look at the decay product and you can figure out, oh, this is what we made and this is what happened to it, and so on and so forth. But at any rate, there were, even when I was in college, back in the previous millennium, there was some discussion that there might be an island of stability, like when you get up to atomic number 125 or 130, that these very, very heavy elements might actually be surprisingly stable, might exist for seconds, maybe even years. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And I thought, well, what could make something like that stable? Well, you're packing all of these protons into a very tight space, and they're all positively charged, and they naturally repel each other. And it's the strong nuclear force that keeps the atom, the nucleus, from blowing apart. And that's moderated to some extent by the presence of a lot of neutrons. And I thought, well, what if there is some sort of negative matter in there that helps create this stability, and that we could harness through a process like fission to warp space? Ta-da!
fun.
I told
what?
that to my friend.
So you did exactly what your job was, which is to take something and make it sound plausible. That's how you explained your job the first time
and
we chatted.
it's a stretch for sure. It's not something that anybody would stake their reputation on coming true someday. But I think it has that sort of air of plausibility. And there is a logic to it, even though that, it might never pan out, certainly will never pan out in any kind of real world application. But, I named the element in honor of Freeman Dyson, Dysonium.
Right.
And it's also a little play on dilithium. And do you remember what fueled the Jupiter 2 on Lost in Space?
I do not.
I didn't watch this. So no.
Deuteronium.
Deuteronium.
Nice.
Another
so what you have though, what you have
better
is
than unobtainium, but I'll let you.
Exactly.
What's a better name?
What you have is a fuel source yet to be invented, or yet to be discovered, I would say, and you have a sort of a grand unifying theory, or that quantum gravity equation or piece being filled in. So it is speculative in some ways, but it's things that we're speculating about now kind of coming to fruition. So I find it much more believable than other things that have had to hand wave away, and which don't really concern, I think, us too much here. There are sci-fi folks that want to know all about, like just said before, the inner workings of the machinery. Pretty much what we dig into at Mission Log is the message, morals, and meanings, and sort of what do these ideas represent? What do the aliens represent? The aliens are us, right? They're the ones that represent things that we do that we probably haven't taken a good hard look at, but we ought to. And having said that, man, I want to talk about the prologue. We could spend hours talking about this prologue, A Toast to the Union. It is so unbelievably well written. Not only the history piece getting up to where we are now, not only the fact that it has our podcast title for this episode, which is Feet in the Mud, Eyes to the Skies. But I thought that was a little Casey Kasem
very good
tip of the hand. A bunch of Star Trek Easter eggs with things like Balance of Terror.
Right. And by the way, I'll do credit to Emmanuel Saadia, who wrote the first draft of that particular part of the book. So when you say, when I said Emmanuel Saadia, he's the guy who actually did the first draft of this and helped me think through some of the what kinds of steps would we imagine taking place between now and the somewhat utopian sort of world of the Orville. And he's an economist and a historian of economics, PhD in economics. And he wrote a book a few years ago that Seth really liked. Emmanuel is a friend of mine who was a writer on Star Trek Enterprise, Chris Black. And Chris turned me on to this book. And then I met Emmanuel. And then when we did the Guide to the Orville, I thought, hey, be interesting to talk to Emmanuel about, this sort of future history section. How do we get here? And so,
what is that book name, if you don't mind?
Trekonomics. Trekonomics is his book, and basically what he argues in Trekonomics, and it's a really fun book to read. It's how do we get to the Star Trek universe is the premise of that book, and Emmanuel's basic argument is that if we develop essentially limitless clean energy, fusion, solar power would play a role and so forth. And if we develop replicator technology or something close to it, like, very advanced 3D printing, then the idea of materialism and working for money and working for shelter and food, et cetera, kind of becomes beside the point. Because if you have free energy and replicators and stock for the replicators and a lot of recycled materials, presumably, but how much does anybody really need to? Yeah, how much does anybody really need to work, right? And so in Emmanuel's mind, reputation becomes the currency of the future. That people strive to become the best at the thing that they are most passionate about, because they have the time to pursue it. Nobody has to work to pay the bills. Nobody has to do drudgery to keep a roof over their head and so forth.
Oh, one of the things that I love about this prologue is that in the Orville, in several episodes, they talk about our reputation as our currency. And
Yes.
it kind of delves into it, but I feel like this gave an explanation of that you just gave an explanation of as well.
Right.
That really makes it make sense. In fact, just when you and I were having drinks with Seth a few years ago, he said that it was you, Andre, that really sold him on the reputation as currency kind of thing. Right. And he was honestly having trouble articulating it at the moment. And he was like, I'd have to get Andre here to explain that to us again. But yes, if you have what you need, then if all of your physical needs are met, then what you have is acceptance needs and achievement needs. And the best way to meet those needs are to accomplish things and to help people.
Yes.
So
that's the fear about, automation and so many of our jobs being taken over by robots and now AI. It's like there's going to be a crisis of meaning. And, what do I do with myself? And I faced that a couple of times in my life when, I didn't get hired for a season of some show. Like I was on Star Trek for 12 years straight. First as the science consultant, then a freelance writer writing for Voyager, then a full-time writer-producer for Enterprise. And then when Enterprise ended, Brandon Braga and I did a show called Threshold for CBS.
Fantastic show.
Carla Cugina, Peter Dinklage, great show, great cast, Brent Spiner. And that unfortunately didn't quite make a full season. And then I didn't work for like 2 seasons. And I did, I wrote spec scripts. I did things to keep myself busy, but man, that was hard. It's hard when you're, I was 20 years younger back then or whatever. But it's hard to structure your own time when you're a person who has grown up in a society where you're expected to work 9 to 5, and that's what most people do. And they have other people generally, at least part of the time, telling them what to do. And so having worked pretty steadily for, 12 years and worked hard in graduate school before that and so forth. Yeah, it was a challenge. It was tough.
It's untethering.
And I felt like it is untethering. There were times when I felt like I just didn't want to get out of bed in the morning, and since the writer's strike ended, I've not been on a show, and I'm working on different little projects, but it's not the same as having to show up somewhere every day. And, Orville was fantastic. That was the best experience of my career in terms of writing, being in a writer's room. Seth is so great. All of the other writers we've had on staff, fantastic. Every day was a lot of fun. It was very creative. We came up with cool stuff. Brandon and I wrote 7 scripts together for the show over 3 seasons. And it was just fantastic,
I know you just gave Mike the green light.
I want to bounce around so much onto different things, but we talked about that meeting our physical needs. And because those were met, you have the line in there that says, because energy was no longer scarce, then nothing was scarce.
Yeah.
And that sort of came out of, that was written as sort of an addendum to, we had nuclear, we had solar, we had wind. We had come through these 2 centuries that were just horrific in order to get there. I'll just read a little excerpt from it right now, if you don't mind. The next two centuries were the most perilous in our long history. As the earth warmed, glaciers melted and sea levels surged. River deltas and coastal plains flooded. Agriculture suffered as heat waves decimated once fertile fields. I'll skip ahead a little bit. New and deadly diseases emerged as bacteria dormant for millennia were released into the environment by melting permafrost and Arctic latitudes. The never-ending destruction of once remote habitats exposed humans to novel viruses against which they had no immunity. Waves of pandemics killed millions. Countless more died from poverty, heat exposure, and starvation. And basically what happened was people coalesced into cities. Those cities then united and kind of formed a central planetary government that got serious about solving these problems. How far-fetched are those ideas, Andre, compared to quantum drive?
No, I think everything that we described there, and again, kudos to Emmanuel Saadia, um, that is a much more plausible scenario than Dysonium and quantum drive. But yeah, I think that's, global warming is kind of baked into the equation now. And I think there's no real turning back from that. I think we can tame it better. We can continue to try to reduce our CO2 emissions and maybe keep us, if not 1.5 degrees C, above the sort of civilizational average over the last few thousand years, hopefully below 2 degrees C. But even that, as we've seen, you can't attribute any particular catastrophic event like the recent wildfires in Los Angeles, which, by the way, are not necessarily over. We will not be out of the danger zone until we get some good rains, because there's still a lot of dry fuel out there, and we're expecting more wind next week. So, that's a dangerous combination.
I'm from Chatsworth, and we had our fair. That's our fair share. I'm actually, the reason I'm so closely looking at it is my family's there, and we like whip the Santa Anas, and so that's all the foothills. So I'm amazed someone hasn't tried to set fire to that area yet. So it's very precarious out there.
Yeah. And so, the Santa Anas have been around forever, and we've had wildfires in LA for a couple of centuries, right? I mean, that in and of itself is not new. But I think what global warming has done is it set the stage for these things to happen on a larger scale and more frequently. Plus, of course, the fact that we have built up these areas, like the Palisades, like Altadena, Pasadena, Sierra Madre, and all of these other communities. There are 10 million people in LA County now. And I don't know how many structures that represents, how many homes, how many businesses, how many skyscrapers. So there's a lot more infrastructure that could potentially be damaged or destroyed by these events than there has been in the past. So
I was in Asheville. They very good friends of mine. Right. My very good friends of mine migrated there during the pandemic. And they do a lot of theater, and I visited 6 or 7 times. And they even said a year ago, well, we're kind of in this really comfy pocket where we're protected from global warming, and their whole city flooded, and they weren't protected from it.
We have a couple of friends in Asheville too, and they were fortunately kind of in a hilly area. Right. And didn't get directly flooded, but it absolutely affected them. Roads were closed, their power's off for days, and
Exactly.
And you're not going to be able to avoid the consequences.
Everyone's going to be touched by it.
They will be more far-reaching. Yeah, exactly. And the changes in the jet stream, if the Gulf Stream, if those warm ocean currents that take water from the sort of the mid-Atlantic or South Atlantic up into northern Europe, that breaks down, that's going to have a whole series of consequences. It's just, all bets are off. But I think what we know is that we're going to have more extreme events, and they're going to affect more and more people. And we need to start thinking about that and preparing for that. And we need to start designing our cities and our structures and generally the way we live to recognize that possibility and do the best we can in mitigating the impacts, because the impacts are going to happen even if we stop burning fossil fuels today. Well, it would take some years before things started to change in terms of global temperatures, right?
Right, and that was, I mean, that's work that's cut out for us and so expertly articulated in this book to give us some real world things to think about right now. Another thing I wanted to touch on was reminding me of, you mentioned the Trekonomics book. I think the book The Story Paradox by Jonathan, I think it's pronounced Gottschall, which I read last year, is mentioned, or at least it has to be alluded to in this forward. Excuse me, this prologue, and how stories can be spun to control people. Right, we love stories, we love entertainment, we love things that tie us together culturally. But there are things that no doubt are used to control people, control civilizations, get spun into different faiths, different political ideologies, and those kind of things.
Oh yeah, there's a battle of narratives going on in the world, and it's unfortunate that there is so little consensus on some of the big questions. And I guess maybe that's always been the way. It feels like it's a little more pronounced today because of our current, political situation and things happening in other parts of the world, maybe. But, even in the 70s when, everybody watched Walter Cronkite and there was only 3 networks and there was a broader consensus about, what's factual and what's
Good,
not.
bad, real, not real. Yeah.
Even then, though, it was, there was a lot of division and a lot of, contention among people. Like, I'm old enough to remember the Vietnam War. And my older brother was, I think they ended the draft just less than a year before he turned 18.
Wow.
So, yeah. And my uncle served in the Vietnam. He was a Navy surgeon in Vietnam, and my aunt was a Navy nurse. And so, yeah, it's like.
Is that how they met?
They met in the Navy. Yes.
Wow.
I don't know if that was overseas or if that was where they were training, but yeah, they met in the Navy.
Wow.
Was it on the set of China Beach? No, I'm just kidding.
Became it where they worked probably inspired a lot of that show.
So this is, the storytelling aspect of, again, in this prologue, imagine you were to visit a primitive alien world where position, status, and power are allocated by a random lottery. In that world, imagine that the range of an individual's experiences, how long she will live, whom she can love, what she will do during her brief passage in the universe are wholly decided at birth based on an arbitrary and cruel drawing of lots. Imagine further that the dwellers of this world invent convoluted stories, myths, and even sciences and laws to justify such an irrational and wasteful arrangement of their lives. Surely you would judge these people harshly, and rightly so. How many new ideas, how many beneficial inventions, how many joys forestalled and foregone? How many artists and poets and scientists silenced? How many children starved?
Yeah.
That I read that. Honestly, like, spaceships are cool.
Yeah.
That paragraph is cool. Like, that paragraph is just an awareness, and if that doesn't make you think and reflect on things, there's no helping somebody, I think.
It feels like the premise for visiting most, kind of how you opened our talk today, Mike. It feels like the premise for most great Star Trek and for great Orville episodes is this one society decides that astrology is the way to live and that's the right way. Yes. But here's the traps of that. Here's how social media could be the trap of this. I'm giving myself a segue just to talk a little bit about one of the things I've been really upset with an audience is disparaging new Trek in order to celebrate the Orville and it's the best Star Trek that we've had since, your era of Enterprise and all that. But the more I think about it, the more I realize how much the Orville has carried on the legacy of what I grew up loving about Trek. And it is because of all of your guys' brains loving something so much, understanding how to bring it into our present and not feeling like you need to make it something different in order to achieve that. And by doing so, you did achieve something different within season 3. You guys really got to spread your wings and do some amazing stuff. Go for it.
And that's where my face lit up before, because you were talking about your writing credits on the Orville. The last time we chatted was before New Horizons premiered. You and Brannon wrote some of the best, if not the best, entries into season 3. I mean, just phenomenal storytelling.
Obviously,
yes,
Mike.
Obviously the best. I mean, it was. But I think did you team up on 4 episodes in season 3?
We did, yeah.
It was.
And it was a unique circumstance because it's just kind of the way things played out for whatever reasons, and the way that we broke that season. Who was available to write what at what time and that sort of thing. So, I mean, since we co-wrote those episodes, we each wrote the equivalent of 2, out of the 10 or whatever we did that season, which is not, that unusual. But yeah, 4 episodes we co-wrote. And, one of the biggest thrills of that season for me is we got to write Midnight Blue, which had a cameo by Dolly Parton. And when we were working on that script, again, this is pre-lockdown, I was so thrilled that, oh my God, we're going to have Dolly Parton here. I'm going to get to meet Dolly Parton. I'm going to have her sign a book.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And sadly, it didn't work out that way.
Oh my God, because they're like literally
her scene. They shot her scene in Tennessee.
With
Seth and John Cassar flew out there, and and the other half, was shot here.
Which is remarkable.
Yeah.
When you think about, and we've talked about it too, and we've had the great honor of having all of you guys from the Orville talk about like what it took to record the series during the pandemic, and it's one of those things that like when I'm surrounded by deniers of the pandemic and anti-vaxxers in my life, and I just want to like shake them and go, do you see what these people did? And like you guys are the smartest. Richard Brilliant and his assistant Kirsten, but like
Larry Brilliant,
Larry Brilliant. I just remember the last name because he's so smart.
He's brilliant.
You just associate Richard with brilliance. Let's face it.
Yeah, sure, that's fair. But there's something just so special about what you all have created with the Orville, and keeping this legacy and like examination of human nature alive through what you guys have accomplished. And that's what makes your book necessary, because you're giving us all these human experiences, and you're filling in the blanks and rounding out these characters. Lycella's in here and she's talking to her people, and that's very special.
So David wrote the autobiography of James T. Kirk and Jean-Luc Picard. Is there a autobiography of? He said he will not write the autobiography of Ed Mercer. By the way, does that open up an opportunity for you to write that?
I had not even thought about that.
There you go. I'll take a 10% fee.
An autobiography. Thank you. Yes, you can be my broker.
I feel like Ed would be uncomfortable making an autobiography, don't you think?
Seth would, yes, for sure.
Well, but Ed would too. Ed
would as well. You're right.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. The other part of the book that became like a third of the book or so is I knew I wanted to say something about all of the episodes that we've done, but I didn't want to do episode synopses because you can find those online. They're kind of dry. It's just a recitation of the events of the story typically. And so it occurred to me, hey, what if I have a little section that says to this young crew member who's joining the ship, and this is their first deep space assignment, our senior officers have agreed to share selected entries from their personal logs to give you a fuller understanding of, blah, 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 blah. And for for me as a writer, I thought, well, this is an opportunity to look at these stories through the lens of our characters in a more sort of first person way, which of course you can't do on TV. We don't listen in on the thoughts of our characters. We don't do monologues typically, right? So I thought, well, that could be a fun way to kind of revisit these episodes and see how they impacted Ed, see how they impacted Kelly and Dr. Finn and Isaac and everybody else, Scott, John Lamar and Gordon and everybody else. And so that I thought, that was a fun little writing challenge, writing exercise for me to review those episodes and think about, God, how would Kelly feel about that in the end?
Right.
We touch on that. And you see that, because these are great actors. Adrian did an amazing job, and
they fill in the world, right? Like you get, especially with her, and Mike loves. Mike's so right. Like her eyes tell just a story with one shot of a look. But I actually think what you've done here is create a comprehensive and interesting show Bible.
Yeah.
Anyone could come in and ride for something like this. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was certainly part of the intention. And I wanted to, kind of capture the voices of the characters in these log entries and try to make it feel like you're really hearing their sort of private thoughts about these experiences. I certainly wonder, if you watch Star Trek, clearly those in the original series, Captain Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, all of those guys are kind of larger than life. Sure. If any one of us had gone through any one of the experiences in pretty much any of those episodes, we'd probably be, in a hospital for a month,
unwell. Yeah.
psychiatric care, and
That's one of the things that we picked up on right away is that, it's funny because one of the original ad campaigns for the Orville was, 400 years in the future, technology has changed relationships, not so much. There was that ad campaign. And we look at these folks and we identified right away that they're relatable, right? You look at Next Gen, those folks are aspirational, right? You want to be like them. I will always fall short, but it'd be great to be that way. These folks are relatable, right? They're relatable people.
They're more like people like you and me, people that we know. And we took that approach with Enterprise as well. One of the things that Brannon and Rick Berman, when they created Star Trek Enterprise, is, we thought about, if we do another show in the 24th century, what new ground do we have to cover? We've done 3 of them now, right? Voyager, Deep Space Nine, Next Gen. Do we want to do another show in the 24th century? Well, what if we went into the 27th or 28th century? Well, what's that going to be like? So we have better holodecks and we can beam farther, and we maybe explore the Andromeda galaxy. It's just going to be kind of more of the same. And thinking about a prequel, the roots, how did we become the United Federation of Planets? What was our role, Earth's role? What happened when we first started to really get out there post first contact, right?
It was just such a beautifully.
That means that they're more like us. They're not. Yeah. They're not going to take beaming down or taking a shuttle down to a new planet and treating it as another day at the office. For them, it's like, oh my God, we're on a new planet.
Earth's shaking every single time. Yeah, wow, that's a very good point.
And it was just such a beautifully crafted hybrid of current day, flight suits, what NASA looks like at the time, and what maybe the original series looked like. And I thought the original series was a very believable projecting into the future of the U.S. space program.
Its time, for sure.
And, Enterprise just really filled in that gap. I think that show is amazing. I think it holds up well. It's beautiful. It's high def. It's visually, it looks great. And
it's got
I really think it's getting,
song.
It has a kick-ass opening song, and I will die on that hill. And it holds up really well.
I'll tell you, that song was written by Diane Warren, who is a very accomplished
prolific
songwriter and hit maker, not a performer herself, but I'm a amateur piano player. I play a lot of classical music, but I like a lot of pop music, and I was a huge fan of Burt Bacharach growing up. He was very popular in the 60s and 70s.
So right.
100%.
Play a lot of his music on the piano, and so I knew who Diane Warren was. And I'm at Seth's house at a Christmas party one year, and who do I see but Quincy Jones and Diane Warren? And I'm like, Quincy, I talked to him very briefly, and then I saw Diane Warren. I said, excuse me, are you Diane Warren? She said, yes, I am. I said, Unbreak My Heart is a perfect song, just perfect. And she said, oh, can I give you a hug?
Oh, so
sweetest
sweet.
woman, yeah. And we had a lovely conversation. And sadly, she lost her house, by the way.
Oh, I didn't know.
Fire. Yeah.
Here's the thing I think about the business and what I've experienced, and maybe you guys aren't the litmus test for everyone in the entertainment business, but I truly believe that you can be of good, solid, golden-heartedness, and that keeps you working. So I imagine Diane is like that, and people continue. Seth brought a lot of you guys from Enterprise because he loved, not only because is he doing what is exactly, he knew who to hire for the right job, but he also cares for you guys and wants to keep working with you.
Yeah.
I don't think you get to do that if you're an ass,
No, and he is absolutely not. He's one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. Anyway.
Well, I meant it as a compliment to you too. I think you continue working in this business if you're a nicer person.
Seth wouldn't have brought you along and the rest of the gang if they were.
I don't think.
Oh, I think that's right. Yeah. No, I think you're right. He is a genuinely good person, and he likes to work with people who are, have that kind of spirit and attitude, and
it resonates through the work. It really does.
Yeah.
Well, we are really gonna, keep our hearts and minds with you and pray. And, a lot of people thought that in LA, if you have enough concrete between you and the fire, that you'd be okay.
Yeah.
And you're right. That's the bigger impact and implication of global warming and how the effects are just going to become worse. So we're going to keep you in our hearts. And we're just so grateful that you spent the time in the midst of this to talk to us.
It's always a pleasure. I love you guys, and I hope we can do it again. And it was great to see you last month.
So nice to see. I was really hoping
like a year ago.
It feels like 7 years ago. It truly does.
I was really hoping that we'd get to see you there. I knew you were dealing with another personal tragedy at the time, and so I was very excited to see you there and get a chance.
You were my favorite.
Jess?
My friend Amanda.
Amanda, please tell her I said hi.
I will. You were my favorite run-in. Don't tell anybody else. Oh. But it was a nice moment to just talk.
I think you've told a lot of people now.
No, I haven't. No, it was nice to talk to like a human in that moment. And Amanda is one of my closest friends, and she's just super talented. But and we got to talk to Misha and all that. It was a lovely time.
Yeah, those parties are something else.
They really are.
They really are. It was packed this year. Did we miss anything you want to talk about? You said you're working on a couple of things. Anything you want to share with?
Nothing. No. I'm pitching a few TV project ideas, and trying to figure out what my next moves might be if I don't get staffed anytime soon. We're still hoping to do a 4th season of the Orville. Seth says it's a matter of when, not if.
I think that's what we believe too. So, and it's going to be such an interesting Hollywood with Mel Gibson and Jon Voight at the realm.
The ambassadors. And Stallone.
We'll see what it'll bring for us.
It's a scary time. It's kind of an exciting time. I was, shocked and disappointed, like many people, and a lot of people were very thrilled and pleased. And you know what? I'm not gonna try to pass judgment on what the next few years might look like.
You know what? I can agree with you.
Nobody can predict anything. I don't think it's going to be good, but I hope to be wrong.
Andre, I don't want to be the person that makes this harder. I think that's the way I'm looking at it. I've been literally trying to look at the world like, how would I act if this was a post-scarcity world? Would I get mad at this person doing that? Probably not.
Right.
And if I really have tried to take this into stride, how can I make this easy? What's my role in this?
Yeah.
And I think it's beautiful to hear you say something similar.
And in other words, what you can say is we must forever honor our commitment to be good ancestors, because we are only as worthy as the children we raise. Ensuring that they thrive and grow into exemplary citizens is our most sacred duty. And that, folks, is from The Guide to the Orville. Pick it up on Amazon or wherever you get your books from Black Horse Comics.
It is an absolutely necessary...
Dark Horse Comics.
Dark Horse. It's an absolutely necessary ownership item if you're an Orville fan.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm very pleased with how it turned out, and very thankful to all of the people, many, many people who helped make that book possible, starting with Seth, starting with the people at Dark Horse, all of the other writers. It's a group effort. And one of the things I love about writing for television is it's not the loneliness of writing a book,
right,
or a novel. It's you get to collaborate, and I love collaborating with other writers, especially the people we've had on staff over the years. It's just been like what a privilege, So I hope to do more.
We're not going to hold our breath, but we'll be right here when it's time. All right, Andre, thanks for joining us. Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, technical production by the ingenious Earl Green. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is podcast.roddenberry.com.
And now, Mission Log the Orville is proud to announce the winners of our Orville Collection giveaway from Master Replicas. Congratulations go to Silver Teede, winner of the Pterodon fighter; April Nichols-Stark, winner of the Orville ECV 197, and the grand prize winner of the entire Orville fleet, Bob Ashon 741. Congratulations to all of our winners, and thanks to everyone for listening, watching, and entering.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.